Coffee with the Editor is proudly brought to you by IRZ and the Naledi Group of companies, which includes Naledi Ring Rollers, Composite Brake Components, and Naledi Foundries. Good morning and welcome to Coffee with the Editor. This morning I am with Timken SA's MD, Kevin Holloway. Thanks for joining me. Good morning, Kevin, and thank you for joining me for Coffee with the Editor.
Thank you for the invite.
So it's been a while since we last had an opportunity to sit down and chat. So for those of us who don't know Timken, and I'm sure there are not that many, but maybe just give me a history of Timken.
Well, if you want a history of Timken, that goes back to 1898.
Okay,
so
maybe not.
that's a little far back. Timken South Africa, however, was established in 1932. Primarily focused on the mining industry and the railway industry at that time. And so there's been a long history in this country serving the rail market since way back when.
And the first kind of products for the South African market?
To my recollection, having been with Timken for 28 years, it was, I think, with Metro Rail, the passenger services at that time. Timken designed the cannon box, the motor suspension tube, and the axle box for the 5M2A motor coaches.
Sure.
And in fact, some of them are still running today.
Yes.
Hence the need for a new PRASA program. But it started off with that product and obviously the associated bearings that go with that product on the journals and in the motor suspension tubes. And then working with Transnet back then, from electric locomotives, 6Es and on right up until the 15E and the 19E, some 6-7 years back. We've been using our expertise to design and locally manufacture that sort of product. So from a costing perspective, there's a long history of design and local manufacture with a very mature supply chain. And we have been putting together the assembly of the rail journal bearings for decades.
So Timken today, what does the product range look like? And it's not just rail that you supply to.
No, sure. Timken covers all industries today. Anything that rotates around a bearing, and Timken have a solution for that application. So I'm talking from the minutest bearing in a dentist's drill, which is smaller than the smallest nail on your finger, to a bearing that you can walk through the inside of. It's that big. Those typically used on wind energy turbines. So yeah, we're focused on automotive, industrial, mining, power gen, food and beverage, you name it, in all industries.
Okay, so let's just come back to rail. There must be like an evolution of the bearing. I mean, things have changed.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, certainly. From the early designs, as industries struggle with trying to move more with less, one of the things is increasing axle load. If you can put more on your wagon and move it from the mine to the port, the better for you. And so right now, Timken have designed and sold and have in operation a 45-ton axle load bearing running very successfully. So that's certainly taken the challenges of design engineering to another level. But we have success with that bearing and it's running very, very well.
Technology going forward, we're talking predictive maintenance, increasing, the lifespan of components that goes
Sure.
into this. I mean, what does the future hold for products such as this?
Well, reconditioning of rail bearings is certainly something that has proven over the years globally to be lucrative. You invest in your new rolling stock, And we've seen rail journal bearings that have lifespans of 30, 40 years, as long as they are maintained correctly. And so if you can coordinate your bearing maintenance with the wheel maintenance, that gives you an opportunity to look at that bearing and open it up, clean it out, repair any minor damage that might be starting before it propagates too far. And you can put that back together again, and honestly, it's as good as new. And so if you can continue with those cycles, you can get 30, 40 years worth of life. And that's what Timken South Africa have been doing successfully as well for many, many years. We've also gone a step further to say that, well, to bring bearings into your workshop, if you're in South Africa, well, that's pretty simple. You can put it on the back of the truck and you can bring it here. But if you're in a country outside of South Africa, somewhere in the heart of Africa, to bring those bearings to South Africa, crossing multiple borders, and to take them back again, proves to be a challenge. So we decided, well, if it's going to be difficult for the bearings to come to us, why don't we go to them? And so we've developed a 12-meter container, 40-foot container, which has got all the equipment inside it to do a full-on AAR standard reconditioning. And so we can put that container onto a boat, onto a truck, onto a train, and we can transport it to where the need is in Africa and do the reconditioning there, and then once we're done, we can move on to the next location.
And that's obviously proven to be quite successful, I'm sure.
Yes, it's worked very well. We've had, over the years, we've had 3 different workshops in operation. Currently, we have 1 in operation today, and potentially going to deploy another. But there was a point in time where we had 3 operation.
So is that just indicative of the current rail climate, or just like change in leadership? I mean, how do you go from having 3 down to 1?
It was just pure demand.
Okay.
Pure demand, that's all. And so as demand goes up, we're geared to take it on. But, you can't have a mobile workshop out there if it's got nothing to do.
Yes.
We've got to bring it home and let it hibernate until such time that the business comes on.
So the mobile units are part of meeting customer needs. What else does Timken do in order to meet customer needs?
From design engineering, where customers face challenges, that's what Timken thrives on. We have huge amount of resources globally, with many years worth of experience. So from application design through manufacture and through after-sales service and technical service engineering, we're a full solutions provider from the design stage to the rest of its life.
So typically, without hopefully not giving away too much information or secret IP, how many bearings would Transnet, for example, go through in a year?
Well, Transnet, it's in the thousands, in the tens of thousands, because they have a big fleet. They probably have in the region of 60,000 wagons running, and Transnet are very good in terms of bringing their wheels in on the scheduled time cycles and making sure that they do the necessary maintenance. So I must say that Transnet are very good in doing that.
So Kevin, technology going forward, and I ask this just about to everybody, the Internet of Things, where are bearings going?
Well, yes, smart bearing technology is certainly something that's being looked at. In fact, has been looked at for many years. I can say that Timken developed a smart bearing, more than 10 years ago. But we find globally that the railroads are somewhat conservative and slow to adopt this new technology traditionally. I'm hoping that as the fourth industrial revolution comes along and the Internet of Things puts more pressure on business, that we'll see railroads more open to accepting that sort of technology and willing to pay for it and not having to test it for a decade before they decide that yes, this is reliable and this is okay, which we've tended to find being the roadblock around the globe.
So Timken SA also services the African market?
Yes.
Sub-Saharan or the whole of Africa?
The whole of Africa.
Okay. So that's serviced?
Right up to Egypt, Morocco. So yes, Africa is certainly, personally, I feel Africa is exciting. I think as time comes, we're going to see Africa with a few mega trends. I think urbanization is going to be a big one, where we see some Eastern countries having population regress. Africa won't be like that, I don't believe. And we're seeing more and more urbanization drives. And as urbanization takes place, people need infrastructure as you urbanize. And so there's urbanization, there's infrastructure, and all of that talks to rail. And then, connectivity between countries, because I think Africa is very rich. And I think the mining world is recognizing that, has recognized that, and is gaining more confidence in Africa. And so we'll see, in my opinion, more and more mining operations opening up. And when you pull out, commodities like iron ore and phosphate and manganese and coal, it's to be transported somewhere. So it comes out of the hole in the ground, it gets put onto a railway, which is the most effective method of transporting that, and then down to the port. And so, I see mining as a good spot in the future, and obviously the urbanization, which leads to passenger movement and rail passenger movement in terms of mass transit is the best way. So personally, I hold high confidence for Africa in decades to come. I really do.
You and me both.
Good.
So you've just spent the last 2 years as the Railroad Association's president. You're not anymore. That role is passed on to Babalwa. What is your takeaway from that experience?
Certainly an exciting experience. It was certainly a pleasure to lead that association. Their mandate of promote and protect the industry is a good one. As they go on export council missions to various countries, particularly in Africa, they are promoting the interests of the local industry in South Africa. So that's great. And in terms of protect their members, you've seen the RRA active in protecting local industry against import and standing up very strongly for that. And I'm absolutely confident that the new board, which is a relatively new board, together with Babalwa as president and Msela as the CEO, I'm excited. I think that they will really do well for the industry and take us places. I really do.
Your experience with the likes of the 1064 project, which not 1064 anymore, but
956 or so. It's a number.
Yes.
Yep.
As well as PASA's Gabella, PASA program, which is we all now know as Gabella. What is your position as a supplier, but also just looking objectively as a sector?
Well, as a supplier, it's somewhat disappointing in terms of the delays that we've experienced. Going back to 2015, 2016, there were sort of strong demands put on suppliers to make sure that you do not miss your delivery schedule on this. So you've received purchase orders, make sure that you do not miss the delivery schedule because you're going to hold up a locomotive build and we cannot have that, and there will be penalties for late supply, etc., etc. And then the build doesn't take place. Yet the industry has geared up, the industry has laid out money on tooling, covered all those costs, built up initial inventories, built inventories according to delivery schedules provided by the OEMs, and then they sit with that inventory and just cannot move it. So your working capital is definitely negatively impacted. And so that's disappointing. There's also an element of, how well have these OEMs abided by the local content commitments, instruction notes that are saying these components in the locomotive need to be 100% local, irrespective of whether you're meeting your 55% or your 60% target. These components will be local. And, I think the OEMs haven't quite fulfilled that. But the industry is ready to supply that, ready and waiting. And that's how that instruction note was derived, because there was a lot of people that put a lot of time in to understand what are the capabilities of our industry. And yes, if we have this capability in the country, then we will make it that this has to be made local. And I'm just afraid that there's been slippage in that. And I certainly hope that as Gabella launches now, which is a 10-year program with potential for a further 10 years, that they certainly embrace and that the industry and industry bodies make sure that they abide by what should be made local and what should be imported.
So bearings was part of that local content component requirement?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And to my understanding, after several attempts to put our best foot forward, we are still of the understanding that the bearings are being imported as part of the other components, in the kit, if you could call it that, with the CKD kits that are coming in. Bearings are coming in those kits and not being supplied locally, or at least assembled locally with certain components of the bearing being made local.
And that has a significant impact on our economy. If it's being imported.
Absolutely. Steel, and then casting, and then machining, and then assembly is all something that the South African industry has great capability in doing. You look at our automotive industry, and I think that's an industry that has demonstrated local manufacturing capabilities. And the rail sector have those capabilities ready, but they're just not being used.
Going forward, Timken, the continent, you say you're quite excited. What does the next 12 months hold for you guys?
Well, 12 months is a pretty short horizon, and we certainly hope that in 12 months, we keep momentum going. I think there is there's a lot of talk about the political situation, and everybody's holding back and nobody's spending, and industries are down and it's terrible. Yet industry is still turning. And if it's turning and working, it's going to break. And when it breaks, you need to fix it. And so the industry that's turning doesn't know what the political situation is, right? And so, I think that we'll get through this thing. I think industry continues. As you look at all the different competitors and players that are playing in the market, no one sits with 100% market share. So there's obviously room to grow in a competitive environment. And so, I'm optimistic. And I think as soon as we get some of the political noise behind us, we'll see good things coming. I look at Transnet and their annual reports and so on, and they've got some good vision. And so, if the industry supports that and they support the industry in turn, I think together we can put South Africa Inc. onto the African continent, definitely.
Kevin, thank you so much for your time.
Only a pleasure. Thank you for having me.